Can I just say, wow? Let's show some love one more time. Powerhouse of a beautiful voice. We are grateful for Alicia and Malcolm accompanying Miss Venus, who is part of our sanctuary choir. And I know that we have opportunities always to expand our musical gifts by way of the choir. And so please see either Alicia or Layla if you would like to also be added to the rotation of special music throughout the summer as well. I also am informed that we'll have some pop-up choirs as well, so all are invited and welcome to share their gifts. A centering prayer this morning to set the tone for our preaching hour, entitled Empty Me, Empty Me. Gracious and Holy One, Creator of all things and of emptiness, I come to you, full of much that clutters and distracts, stifles and burdens me. It makes me a burden to others. Empty me now of gnawing dissatisfactions, of anxious imaginings, of fretful preoccupations, of nagging prejudices, of old scores to settle, and of the arrogance of being right. Empty me of the ways I unthinkingly think of myself as powerless, as a victim, as determined by sex, age, race, as being less than I am, or as other than yours. Empty me of the disguises and lies in which I hide myself from other people and from my responsibility for my neighbors and for the world. Hollow out me a space in which I will find myself, find peace and a whole heart, a forgiving spirit and holiness, the springs of laughter, and the will to reach boldly for abundant life for myself and the whole human family. Amen. Good morning once again, beloved community. We are continuing or beginning either a new 6-week sermon series entitled Living. Can you say that word with me? Living. The goal of this sermon series is for you and I to begin exploring how we might begin to take steps together of living the life that Jesus desired for all of us to live. To share a piece of my hermeneutic thought of what this life looks like, it comes from John 10:10. The names Jesus' sentiments for humanity. And from my perspective, this is kind of where I believe God is inviting us to begin our conversation, where it says, a thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I came to give life, life in all its fullness. I would add the piece, life to everyone. You know, it's my belief that when I unpack just that little piece of scripture, there often seems to be roadblocks, even metaphorical thieves that consciously or subconsciously create these barriers that prevent people from living their life to its fullest. You know, the justice heart of me reminds me that it is difficult to live when a person is more worried about having something to eat. I've been there before. It's difficult to live when society often contradicts one's human worth and value. It's difficult to live even when a person appears to have it all of the money, all of the friends, all of the accolades. It's difficult. It's difficult to live for many, both individually and collectively is where my sermonic heartbeat starts this morning. Hence why the first lesson of focus for us to glean from that I'm inviting us to consider over these next 6 weeks comes from the book of Ezekiel. I'd like to paint this story in a way where it meets us where we are today. Because in effect, this prophet Ezekiel represents a person trying to figure out how to live in the midst of some very unsettling circumstances. In the story, if you walk with me, the prophet Ezekiel represents a powerful metaphor that speaks to the death of the human soul. This imagery, for those who likes images, is a valley of dry bones, devoid of life and purpose, waiting to be awakened by the breath of divine inspiration. Ezekiel 37, the first 3 verses, will find a prophet in the midst of this desolate valley, surrounded by the remains of what once was. For me, being a United Methodist pastor who's been a pastor for over 20-something years, I find myself in this story surrounded by the remainings of what once was. The church is not the same as it was when I began in my early 20s. And this is what this scene is painting for us, a possible scene of death and decay that mirrors the existential emptiness that many of us experience in some point of our lives. You know, what I'm naming is sometimes for some of us, it's not always a good morning. And there's been times in my life where I did not feel highly blessed and favored. And I believe that's what this Ezekiel passage is inviting us to consider. Historically, this passage from Ezekiel was written during a time of great turmoil for the people of Israel. I would be remiss if I did not liken it to still the state of the church, Big C as a whole. Some of us are still in great turmoil, just like the people of Israel. But back to the story, these people have been exiled from their land, their temple destroyed, thereby leaving their identity shattered. This vision of the valley of dry bones served as a powerful message of restoration and renewal, reminding the people that even in the face of destruction and despair, the bigger message of this text is that God can bring power and bring life out of death. Why this first lesson is especially important as our sermonic focus over these next few weeks for me is that I believe, church, in this story, you and I are witnessing the perspective of someone searching for life's meaning and purpose in the midst of all that felt scattered and lost and just doesn't feel quite the same anymore. And as a result of such a pursuit of a person willing to endure the changes of life, the changes of history, what we'll learn is that there's a profound message of hope and renewal that awaits. Just as Ezekiel was called to prophesy to the dry bones and see them come to life, we too are invited to speak life into our own circumstances. We're invited to breathe hope into our own despair, church. We're invited to believe in the possibility of transformation and renewal, even if it doesn't appear to be evident. For me, how you and I begin to really achieve this possibility of transformation and renewal, both individually and collectively, begins with a journey of you and I exploring what it means to live openly. Can you say the word with me? Open. You know, it's my belief that resurrection, transformation, and renewal is always before us. You know, I tend to proclaim a lot that just as the problem is in our midst, I believe that the solution is in our midst. However, if I'm honest, I also find within myself that sometimes the reason why there may be perceived dry bones all around me is simply because my heart and mind has not always been open to other possibilities. You see, church family, living openly for me is a profound and liberating choice that resonates deeply within the essence of our humanity. My grandma would always say, you can choose to have a good morning. You can choose to have a good day. You can choose the outcome of your interactions with one another. You can choose this. It's a courageous act, this power of choice. Embracing who we are unashamedly and unapologetically, and presenting our true selves to the world in this manner, to choose to present ourselves in this manner. This authenticity that I'm naming is not just a personal triumph. What we're looking at in this power of choice is hope manifested. It's a hope manifested so that we can, in our own walk in life, be an inspiration for others who may struggle with their own sense of self. The importance of living openly cannot be overstated, as it fosters a more inclusive understanding and compassionate world. When you and I choose to live openly, church, we are actively rejecting the confines of societal expectations and norms that often pressure us to conform. And this act of maybe seemingly defiance against these constraints is a declaration of our individuality and our right to exist as we are. Living open, for me, empowers you and I to pursue our passions, express our emotions, and connect with others on a more genuine level. You know, I'm really tired of just surface conversations. I am at a place in my life, I don't know if it's because I'm in my 40s or whatever, but I want to have a real conversation with someone. I want to be able to see who you are, you see who I am, for it to be transparent, for it to be safe, for it to be open. For me, that is what living open looks like. By living openly, we're inviting others to see the full spectrum of our experiences, from our joys to our real struggles, fostering deeper and more meaningful relationships. For me, that is what church is all about. It is coming together in a real manner, in a genuine manner, to express these exchanges and learning from one another. Moreover, living openly serves as a powerful testament to our resilience. We clean up really well on Sunday morning, but I would submit to you also that every one of us that has showed up or is watching online or will watch online later, we all represent a struggle that we have worked our way through. In the Black church, we'll say, you don't know my story. You don't know the things I've been through. But church, for me, invites us to be open to those struggles and find the beauty of God's grace and mercy in the midst of it all. All of what I'm naming, it takes immense strength to navigate a world that can be so unkind to those who deviate from the perceived norm. So I would be remiss if I did not name that there is risk to living openly. I'm assuming that even this whole message of openness might even contradict some of our upbringings. But if we really want to get somewhere in our work and pursuit for love for all, I believe it starts with some level of openness, standing tall in our truth, thereby becoming living proof that it is possible to thrive despite adversity. And what I love about Lincoln First is I believe we're beginning to unpack how to do those things. Whether it's the crosstalk class, table talk class, every time we come together by way of music, worship, service, and more, I believe that's where we are working towards together. It's a resilience that can inspire others to embark upon their own journeys of self-discovery and acceptance. I believe that is what it means to make disciples of Christ for the world and transformation. Our openness and this invitation can act as a guiding light, showing others that they too can find their way through the darkness of doubt and fear. That in our openness, if I can tell you my struggles, maybe you'll be inspired as well. And it's wash, rinse, and repeat. And that's how we help others to make it through this thing called life. Thank you for sitting through this openness conversation. But just to make sure that we are connecting the dots this morning, there are two powerful examples of where I believe we can witness someone exercising this level of courageous faith in living openly. The first example is in our gospel this morning of Nicodemus. You know, in John 3, 1 through 17, in my eyes, I'd like to paint maybe a new way of seeing this encounter. We're looking at an intriguing figure named Nicodemus, a Pharisee and a member of the Jewish ruling council, who comes to Jesus, the story tells us, under the cover of night. That's a whole mood right there, at nighttime. Kind of mirrors the woman at the well as well, where she didn't come for the living water until the heat of the day when no one else was around. Very similar. Essentially, Nicodemus, back to the story, represents, though, the struggle, in my eyes, between the old ways in which he was trained up in, and then there's this transformative message of Jesus that he keeps hearing about in the streets. Nicodemus, if you walk with me, was a Pharisee, a group known for strict adherence to Jewish law and traditions. The Pharisees often opposed Jesus because his teachings challenged their interpretations of the law all the time, one would say. So coming to Jesus by night indicates Nicodemus's fear of being associated with him and the potential repercussions from his peers. This nocturnal visit also symbolizes the tension between his position, but there's also a curiosity about Jesus' teachings. And it shows us that both can coexist at the same time. But one of Jesus' teachings that I'd like to pitch my sermonic tent on this morning, it brought a lot of discussion from our Wednesday night Applying the Sermon to Life class. It was this idea that part of living open, as we've already discussed, is dependent upon our ability to embrace and live out the second portion of verse 7 that says, you must be born above. You must be born above. Typically, I don't know about you, but it's been my experience that normally the pursuit of sanctification, Christian love and perfection requires you and I to be born again. Have you heard that term before? Okay, good. I'm not speaking to myself. I thought maybe I was. I don't know. Thereby, by making the question, though, here's this. Is being born again and being born above the same thing? The quick answer I'd like to suggest is no, they're not the same thing, but they are deeply interconnected. For being born again is a term that signifies a spiritual rebirth. I'm talking about a profound transformation within a person. This concept of born again is rooted in Christian theology, especially in the teachings of Jesus as recorded in the Gospel of John, John 3:3 to be exact. And it emphasizes a renewal of the soul. To be born again is to undergo a fundamental change in one's nature. It's a rebirth that transcends mere physical existence. This transformation involves a personal encounter with the divine, leading to repentance, acceptance of God's grace, and a new life in Christ Jesus. Being born again symbolizes shedding the old self with its patterns of sin and separation from God, and embracing a new self that is aligned with divine will and love. You know, I just turned 45 years old, May 2nd. But when I think about the Kirstie 20 years ago, I'm a different person. I've grown in some of those fruits of the Spirit. Not saying I've arrived, but you can see that transformation. You know, for me, being born again is literally about a radical reorientation of one's life towards spiritual truth, perhaps moral integrity, and an intimate relationship with the Creator. Now, switching gears, if you're still with me, the phrase born above delves into the ontological roots of one's existence. It's pointing to a divine origin that transcends earthly bounds. This concept implies that one's true essence and identity are derived from a higher celestial source. One might even think on this Trinity Sunday that identity came from God in three persons. Being born above suggests that our souls originate from this triune realm and that our ultimate purpose is to reconnect with this Trinitarian God. Being born above highlights our divine origin and potential, reminding us, and this is what I like, that our true nature really is spiritual. And being born above speaks to the eternal aspect of our being, which remains untainted by the material world. Whereas being born again addresses the necessity of transformation with our current existence. It acknowledges the reality of our human condition, marred by imperfection and distance from God, but it offers a pathway to reclaim our divine nature through conscious, transformative experiences. Thereby, if we connect this conversation with our friend Nicodemus, why I'm so moved by his quest for purpose and clarity is because somewhere inside of Nicodemus, in my imagination, Nicodemus dared to live open in such a way by exploring both being born again and being born above. Now, grant you, when he was living his life, I don't think he was writing like a dissertation paper on this or anything. But if you really review how his life plays out, I invite you to continue reading up on Nicodemus. We're seeing these two, born above and born again, at play in his life. First off, Nicodemus exhibited being born again by acknowledging on some level that he needed renewal and transformation, which is huge. The main way that Nicodemus did this is he was open. He was open to radical thinking and reorientation of his life and purpose. It was this openness that allowed a spiritual rebirth that transcended mere adherence to his religious laws and traditions. For Nicodemus, this meant moving beyond the Pharisaic focus on external conformity to the Mosaic law, and it invited him to embrace a deeper, more intrinsic change. His journey went from a cautious inquirer to a bold defender and devoted follower, and all of this exemplifies this great transformation. On the contrary, the idea of being born again signifies shedding old ways of thinking and living. And we saw Nicodemus do that. It started in his nightly journey to see Jesus. And it was in this nightly connection where he's sneaking out, he began to embrace a new identity rooted in the spiritual truths revealed by Jesus. Nicodemus modeled being born above, and over time, it was his openness that led him to a true spiritual life and purpose that came from the divine source of Jesus' teachings. You see, church, it was not merely human effort or lineage, but for Nicodemus, understanding that his spiritual rebirth was not just a personal transformation, but it was a calling from above that gave his life a new sense of purpose and direction. Being born above connected Nicodemus to a higher divine mission beyond the temporal and material concerns of his role as a Pharisee. So why this conversation matters, church family? Isn't this discussion rich? I hope you're enjoying it. But why this conversation matters, church family, can be hopefully then witnessed in a second powerful example I would like to share that I believe is especially fitting for this Memorial Weekend that we're in on this topic of living open, being born above, and being born again. You see, this past Friday, I had the privilege of attending the first of 4 installment presentation of the 688 all-Black female World War II Battalion conversation led by the Ollie class at UNL. Ollie, I know most of you are familiar, but it's the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And I was there with my mother-in-law, Nancy Engel. A little background, the 688 Central Postal Directory Battalion, often referred to as the 6888, was an all-Black, all-female battalion in the United States Army during World War II. Formed in 1944, the battalion was a response to the backlog of undelivered mail in the European theater of operations, which was affecting troop morale. Let me say it even plainer. This battalion became the lifeline for these soldiers, who, in other words, would not hear from their families if it were not for their efforts. So comprising of 855 women, led by Major Charity Adams Early, who I learned ended up getting some of the highest honors above all of her counterparts, even the women, all women, the 6888 was dispatched to Birmingham, England, and later to Paris in France to address this crisis of the soldiers not getting their mail. These women worked tirelessly in difficult and often dangerous conditions. They operated in unheated warehouses and worked around the clock in 3 shifts to sort and deliver millions of pieces of mail. Despite facing discrimination and skepticism from their peers and superiors, and it was a lot of that going on, they managed to clear a 6-month backlog of mail in just 3 months in Birmingham. Their motto, no mail, low morale, underscores the crucial role they played in maintaining the spirits of American soldiers far from home. How I'm also seeing these women live openly is, I want you to know, not one of them named any of the challenges, any of the prejudices that they went through. It was important for them to just share their service. How we are learning about their conditions was often from other people, mostly white people, who was doing the research during their time to pull out some of these controversial issues surrounding these women. But the women themselves, they did not dwell on any of the pushback or the marginalization that was coming their way. In fact, I saw the moving video, and I would like to see if I can play it one day, but they were walking like beautiful, fearless soldiers, each foot at the same left, right, straight lines. They had pride on their faces because, I need to say it unapologetically, they were leading our country. They were the lifeline of these soldiers. They were the connection to these soldiers, to their families, and that's something to celebrate. In my eyes, making this connection with our conversation then, the members of the 6888 exemplified, in my eyes, what it means to live openly and live out one's values, even in the face of systemic racism and sexism. In a time when both African Americans and women were marginalized as a whole, these soldiers did not let societal limitations dictate their contributions to our country. Their determination, their professionalism, their excellence were a powerful testament to their belief in equality and justice. By serving with distinction, they challenged stereotypes, they broke barriers, they set a new precedent for future generations. Their success and the respect they earned from their peers and superiors helped pave the way for the integration of the armed forces and the broader civil rights movement that followed. You see, church family, living openly and authentically often requires a strong sense of self and purpose. For many of these women, their faith and moral convictions were a source of strength. The phrase born again and born above can be seen as a metaphor for their spiritual and moral rebirth, which guided them through the adversities they faced. And I'll say it again, there were many. Their commitment to their mission was not just a duty to our country, but also an embodiment of their higher values and beliefs. The spiritual resilience was crucial in maintaining their morale and unity. It enabled them to overcome the prejudices they faced and to perform their duties with excellence. Their faith and their mission and in each other forged a bond that transcended the racial and gender barriers of their time. I've discussed a lot why these two stories of Nicodemus and the story of the 688 Battalion matters to us as a church denomination from my perspective. It's because it's stories like these, church, that are not just historical and scriptural accounts. They are living, breathing narratives that inspire and will continue to guide the United Methodist Church as it navigates her future. By drawing from the courage, by drawing from the transformation, by drawing from these boundary-breaking actions, these are some tangible examples of how the UMC can continue to build a more inclusive and loving community. You know, embracing LGBTQ persons fully within the life of the church is a testament to living out the radical hospitality and justice that Jesus modeled and that the heroes of history, like the women of the 688 have shown us is possible. Furthermore, why this conversation matters most from my perspective is because it allows you and I to get one step closer to be able to really see the living people before us. O mortal one, can these bones live? Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Thanks be to God.